There comes a time in every soul's journey when silence begins to roar louder than any apology ever could. You do not announce the shift. You simply stop bending. The same people who once benefited from your softness will now call your boundaries arrogance. They will whisper that you have changed. But what they truly mean is that you are no longer willing to participate in your own diminishment. When I speak of change, I am not referring to the external fluctuations that decorate the surface of life. I speak of an alchemical transformation that takes place in the deepest caverns of the psyche, the place where the self, that timeless archetype of wholeness, begins to awaken from centuries of sleep. To stop tolerating disrespect is to realign with the self's authority, to dethrone the ego's fear of abandonment, and to reclaim the forgotten kingdom of dignity within. In the language of the unconscious, disrespect is never merely an interpersonal event. It is a mirror. Each time someone crosses your boundary, the psyche offers you a symbol of how much of yourself you still give away. The outer offender is the inner complex wearing a human mask. You are not fighting with them. You are wrestling with the part of your own soul that believes it deserves such treatment. Imagine for a moment that you stand before a vast mirror made of mist. In it, you see not the face you wear in daylight, but a procession of figures, the archetypes that inhabit you. The child trembles, afraid to lose love. The hero insists on proving worth. The martyr bows until its spine is dust. And behind them all stands the shadow, calm, dark, unyielding, whispering, "No more." That whisper is not anger. It is remembrance. It is the self reclaiming its throne through the courage of your refusal. They will say, "You have changed," because they do not understand what healing looks like from the inside. They do not see the nights you spent drowning in the unconscious, gathering the fragments of your forgotten power. They do not see the dreams in which your soul rehearsed this new stance. Dreams of closed doors, of broken chains, of silent departures. They only see that you now walk differently, speak more slowly, meet their manipulation with eyes that no longer beg to be seen. This moment, the reclaiming of respect, is the crucifixion of the old personality. For years, the ego built its sense of identity upon compliance, upon being needed, upon avoiding conflict at any cost. The false peace you called harmony was merely repression. Every yes that violated your truth was a small act of self-betrayal, sanctified by fear. To stop tolerating disrespect is to die to that persona. It is to let the mask slip and reveal the raw face beneath the one that trembles but will not kneel. Do not mistake this death for cruelty. Individuation, the process through which the human being becomes whole, demands sacrifice. The sacrifice is always of illusion. You are not losing people. You are losing the conditions under which their love could exist. You are not becoming cold. You are allowing your warmth to be governed by discernment instead of desperation. This is divine arithmetic. When the soul subtracts disrespect, it multiply light. The collective consciousness, however, fears this mathematics. Society thrives on adaptation, on politeness, on the suppression of authentic emotion. When you begin to assert boundaries, you disrupt the social hypnosis. Those who remain asleep will call you selfish because they cannot yet distinguish between love and servitude. But I tell you, true compassion is impossible without self-respect, without the firm root of dignity. Kindness decays into dependency. You may notice that your dreams begin to change as you step into this new alignment, where once you dreamed of being chased, you now find yourself walking through open doors. The persecutor fades, the landscape brightens. The unconscious celebrates your inner stance long before the world does. It begins to feed you symbols of sovereignty, a key, a mountain, Aliens Gaze. These are not random images, they are messages from the deep self saying, you have remembered your name. And every human being carries within them a secret agreement formed in childhood. If I am good enough, quiet enough, small enough, they will not leave. This contract binds the adult long after the childhood threat has vanished. Disrespect becomes the familiar rhythm of that contract, replaying itself in different disguises. A parent, a lover, a friend, a superior. You tolerate it because it feels like home, but the psyche mercifully will not let you stay asleep forever. It sends pain as a herald of awakening. The moment you say, enough, you are tearing the ancient contract in half. They will call you changed because you have disrupted the pattern that kept their own shadows unexamined. Every relationship, conscious or not, is an exchange of projections. When you refuse to carry someone's projection of the compliant one, the healer, the ever-forgiving, they must face what they tried to deposit into you. Your change is the mirror, returning the contents of their unconscious back to them, and that is why they will resist, attack, or retreat, not because you have wronged them, but because they have glimpsed themselves. This is sacred work. To stop tolerating disrespect is not merely psychological hygiene, it is initiation. It means that the archetype of the warrior, long exiled from your personality, has risen to guard the temple of the heart. It means that the feminine within you, whether you are man or woman, has remembered her own sanctity and will no longer be defiled by neglect. It means that the self has judged the false peace unworthy and demanded truth as its offering. You may feel alone at first. The path of authenticity often leads through deserts of misunderstanding, yet solitude in such a phase is not emptiness, it is incubation. In the silence left behind by departed voices, the psyche begins to sing again. You start to hear the faint music of your own soul, a melody uncorrupted by approval. And when you learn to dance to it, life reorganizes itself around your new vibration. The people who can meet you in respect appear not as coincidence, but as reflection. Do not rush this phase. Every transformation that is rushed becomes cosmetic. The old habits of self-betrayal must decay fully before new patterns can take root. Sometimes the universe will test your resolve, sending familiar situations in different closing an opportunity to say no where. Once you would have said yes, these are not punishments but rehearsals for your new role in the cosmic drama, the role of one who honors their soul's dignity above all. I have often said that what you do not make conscious will manifest as fate. Disrespect tolerated becomes destiny repeated. The unlived truths of your being will find expression through outer conflict until you are brave enough to express it through conscious choice. So do not fear the accusations of change. Fear instead the stagnation of a life lived in appeasement. The dream that humanity secretly shares is not of perfection, but of integrity. We long to stand whole, unfragmented, no longer torn between pleasing and being. When you stop tolerating disrespect, you become a symbol of that dream. You remind others, even those who resent you, that it is possible to live without selling the soul for connection. This is why your presence will both attract and disturb, for you are now the embodiment of a forgotten truth. Listen carefully to the voices that say you have changed. Beneath their judgment lies unconscious grief. They mourn the loss of control, the disappearance of the old you who mirrored their illusions. But that version of you was never truly alive. It was a psychological adaptation, a survival persona built in the caves of childhood. The real you, the eternal you, has simply taken the wheel. You have not changed. You have returned. And yet, the mind will sometimes doubt. It will whisper, perhaps they are right. Perhaps I am hard, proud, distant. In those moments, pause, place a hand upon your chest and ask the soul, not the ego, for truth. The soul will answer not in words, but in warmth, a quiet certainty that peace without self-respect is false peace. You will feel it as expansion in your body, as if light itself refuses to shrink again. Trust that sensation. It is the compass of individuation, guiding you home. Remember, to the unconscious, every act of self-honoring is a ritual. When you speak your boundary, you are not merely defending your ego, you are affirming the divine order within creation. You are declaring that chaos will not reign in your temple. You are telling the cosmos that you have learned the sacred art of differentiation, that love and self-erasure are not the same. So let them say, you have changed. Smile gently, for they are half right. You have changed, but not in the way they mean. You have shed the illusion that respect must be earned through self-neglect. You have outgrown the childhood religion of pleasing gods who never existed. You have awakened to the realization that to honor your soul is the highest form of worship. The alchemists called this stage calcination, the burning away of impurities, so that the gold of the spirit may emerge. Every rejection, every accusation, every misunderstanding that follows your transformation is part of that sacred fire. Let it burn. What is true will not perish. What is false must, and as the ashes settle, you will notice something extraordinary. The energy once spent maintaining false harmony becomes creative power. You will write, speak, build, love from a deeper source. The libido that once fueled guilt now fuels purpose. The psyche rewards authenticity with vitality to the world. It will seem as though you have become radiant overnight, but you will know it is the radiance of one who no longer bargains with disrespect. When the soul begins to awaken to its dignity, life rearranges itself with both mercy and severity. The people who once called you friend may now feel like strangers. The environments where you once felt safe may start to suffocate you. And this is the paradox of growth. What once nourished you now tastes of decay. And what once frightened you now calls your name like a forgotten home. In this mysterious phase, you will feel torn between two worlds, the one that formed your personality and the one that is summoning your essence. The old world taught you compromise. The new world demands truth. The old world rewarded you for being agreeable. The new world will reward you for being authentic. Between them lies the crucible of transformation, and few dare to cross it willingly. They will say you have become cold, but in truth, you have become clear. They will say you have closed your heart, but in truth, you have stopped confusing open-heartedness with self-abandonment. Every no you speak now is not an act of cruelty, but a sacred exorcism driving out the ghosts of every moment you said yes against your soul. The unconscious watches these decisions with silent reverence. You may think you are acting alone, but the entire architecture of your psyche is moving with you. Archetypus, still, the warrior straightens his spine. The queen within you reclaims her throne. Even the child, long, hidden and trembling, begins to trust that it will never again be left undefended. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, a cosmic alignment occurs inside you. The fragments of self begin to orbit their rightful center again. To understand this process, you must recognize that disrespect is not just an external act, it is an inner condition that the outer world mirrors. The one who disrespects you merely exposes the vibration of unworthiness still echoing within. When you confront them, you are confronting that inner echo. This is why growth feels like warfare. You are not just dealing with people, but with psychic residues, old identifications, inherited wounds, ancestral voices whispering compliance. The ego resists. It trembles before rejection, for rejection is death to its old narrative. I am loved because I please, yet individuation demands a higher truth. I am loved because I exist. The difference seems small, but it separates bondage from freedom. You may recall moments when your kindness was mistaken for weakness, your silence for consent. The psyche absorbs these distortions like stains upon the fabric of self-image. Over time, you begin to believe that to be respected is to be feared, and to be loved is to be used. These are lies the world taught you to survive its own unconsciousness. To awaken from them is to feel both grief and liberation grief for the innocence that believed in false harmony, and liberation for the self that now sees through it. Sometimes this awakening manifests through dreams. You may dream of locked rooms, of voice demanding entry. Of doors you finally close. Such dreams are not trivial. They are enactments of boundary formation within the psychic theater. The unconscious rehearses what the waking mind resists. It will show you, symbolically, that protection is love, and that closing a door can be an act of compassion when it keeps chaos outside. In my work, I once observed a woman who spent her life accommodating others in dreams. She stood at a banquet table filled with guests who devoured everything she served. Yet no one looked at her. One night, the dream changed. She stood and overturned the table. The guests vanished into smoke. She woke weeping, but with relief. That was the night her soul declared independence. From that morning on, she stopped apologizing for existing to the unawakened eye. This looks like rebellion, but to the soul, it is restoration. The psyche is not interested in politeness. It seeks wholeness, and wholeness often arrives disguised as disruption. When you say, "I will not accept this anymore," you are not becoming defiant. You are aligning with the natural order that was broken by fear. In truth, every act of disrespect tolerated creates imbalance within the inner kingdom. It splits the psyche into the one who suffers and the one who observes, into victim and suppressor, into silent child and false adult. Each split demands energy to maintain, energy that should belong to creativity, joy, and love. When you heal the split, when you refuse to play both oppressor and oppressed within yourself, the energy returns to its source. You begin to live again. This is why those who reclaim self-respect often appear more radiant, more magnetic. Even if they say less, their life force, once leaking through the cracks of self-denial, now flows through the full circuit of their being. Others sense this unconsciously and call it change, but it is simply coherence. The personality finally harmonizing with the soul. However, beware of the shadow's temptation during this transition. The shadow may whisper, "Now you must never forgive. Now you must become untouchable." But that is merely pride, dressed as healing. True respect does not need armor. It needs presence. The moment you overcompensate, you fall into identification with the very energy you sought to transcend. The goal is not domination, but balance, the quiet strength of one who knows their worth and does not seek to prove it. The key lies in discernment, not defense. There will be times when someone's words sting and your ego cries, "This is disrespect." But look deeper. Sometimes it is the voice of truth disguised as discomfort. The mature soul learns to differentiate between insult and insight. Not every challenge is an attack. To tolerate truth, even when it wounds, pride is as noble as refusing to tolerate abuse. Both are expressions of integrity. You will know the difference by its effect on your energy. Disrespect drains, truth refines. One leaves you smaller, the other leaves you clearer. There's also the collective dimension of this transformation. The more individuals awaken to their inner worth, the more society must evolve. Entire cultures have been built upon the suppression of authenticity systems that reward compliance and punish self-respect. To stop tolerating disrespect, then, is not just personal revolution but spiritual rebellion against unconscious culture. You become a living contradiction to everything, false that civilization has normalized, and so the accusations come, you think you're better, you've become difficult, you've changed. The psyche must withstand this collective projection. These are not just words, they are attempts by the unconscious collective to restore equilibrium, to pull the awakened back into sleep. But every time you stay firm in the face of such projection, you weaken the spell of collective hypnosis. You contribute to humanity's individuation. The alchemists described this phase as separatio, the separating of gold from dross. You are now distinguishing essence from illusion. This separation is painful because it dissolves attachments that once defined you. You may lose relationships, titles, roles, even beliefs, but the loss is only of what was borrowed. What is truly yours cannot perish. As you navigate this inner alchemy, solitude becomes a teacher. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the self's classroom. Within it, you will hear forgotten voices, intuition, creativity, divine guidance. These are the emissaries of the deeper psyche, long drowned out by the noise of people-pleasing. As you listen, you begin to reconstruct a life not around fear, but around truth. You may find yourself drawn to different music, different spaces, even different colors. The psyche expresses transformation through taste, through subtle shifts in resonance. What once felt like belonging now feels like burden. What once seemed ordinary now glows with meaning. You are tuning to a new frequency, and the world adjusts accordingly. There is a peculiar peace that comes when disrespect no longer touches you, not because it no longer exists, but because you no longer identify with the version of yourself it could wound. You become transparent to offense. It passes through you like wind through leaves. This is not detachment born of numbness, but transcendence born of wholeness. You no longer need others to mirror your worth. You have seen your reflection in the eternal self. And yet, the journey is cyclical. Even after awakening, remnants of the old pattern may return. The psyche does not evolve in straight lines, but in spirals. Each time you encounter a test of respect, it invites you to embody your truth more deeply. The difference now is awareness. Before, you reacted unconsciously. Now, you respond from consciousness. That difference is liberation. When they say you've changed, do not argue. Simply bow inwardly and bless the misunderstanding, for one day they too will reach this threshold, and your transformation will serve as their silent permission slip. Every soul must eventually face the choice: continue in unconscious bondage, or risk the loneliness of authenticity. You have chosen the latter, and though the road is narrow, it leads to God within, there is a sacred paradox here. To stop tolerating disrespect is to make space for divine respect, for life itself to treat you as sacred. The outer world mirrors the inner law you uphold. When you demand reverence from yourself, the universe aligns to match it. Opportunities arrive, synchronicities increase, not because you manifested them, but because your frequency now corresponds with truth. You will notice even nature responds. The wind feels different, the light more alive. The psyche and cosmos are not separate. They dance as reflections of each other. The moment you respect your inner world, the outer one bows in kind. To those who accuse you of change, you might wish to say, yes, I have changed. I have remembered what it means to belong to myself. Remembered that love is not earned through suffering. Remembered that peace built on silence is counterfeit. Remembered that my soul is not a servant of other people's comfort. And as you live from this remembrance, your presence becomes medicine. You no longer teach through argument, but through vibration. You walk into rooms and the unconscious rearranges itself around your integrity. Some will resist it, others will be inspired, but all will feel it. That is the quiet power of individuation. It transforms not by preaching, but by being. Every genuine transformation comes with a price. The death of approval. There will come a moment when you realize that to keep growing, you must surrender the need to be understood. Those who knew the old you, the compliant, the accommodating, the endlessly forgiving, will not recognize the figure you have become. They will speak of you as though you have betrayed some sacred bond, but what you have truly betrayed is the pact of self-erasure. When you refuse to shrink for others, you are not rejecting them, you are rejecting the illusion that love must cost you your essence. The psyche is structured upon equilibrium, and every false equilibrium must be shattered before truth can establish its dominion. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, the unconscious celebrates, but the collective trembles, because when one soul wakes, the entire web of relationship begins to vibrate with new frequency, exposing the falseness woven into it. There is no need for resentment in this process. Anger is often the first language of awakening, but it is not its final dialect. In the early stages, anger serves as the torch that lights the cave. It reveals where the soul was buried. But once you have seen, you must not let the torch burn the temple. The higher stage is compassion, not the sentimental kind, but the fierce compassion of understanding how blindness operates in all beings. Those who disrespected you were not always malicious. They were unconscious. They mistook your silence for consent because they had never met their own. To see this truth is to be liberated, not only from them but from bitterness itself. Because bitterness is still bondage. It keeps your energy tied to the very dynamic you escaped. When you forgive, you do not justify, you release. Forgiveness in Jungian terms is the reintegration of the split of energy once projected upon the offender. You withdraw your projection and reclaim your power. You say, what I saw in you was also something unresolved in me, but now I bring it home. To tolerate disrespect is to live in exile from your own self. To stop tolerating it is to end that exile, yet every return demands solitude. Individuation is not a social process. It is the descent of the individual into the underworld of their own soul. You will wander through confusion, doubt, and the ghostly voices of the past calling you back. The psyche tests your resolve, not to punish, but to refine your awareness. There will be dreams of old faces, voix pleading reconciliation, moments of sudden nostalgia for what once hurt you. Do not interpret this as regression. It is the psyche's way of testing the new boundaries. It reintroduces the old symbols to ensure you have truly integrated the lesson. When the dream no longer evokes guilt but peace, you will know you are free. Freedom, however, is a heavy gift. To live without tolerating disrespect means to live without excuses, without the sweet narcotic of blame. The ego loses its favorite story. They mistreated me, therefore I am righteous. The awakened self sees through this. It recognizes that both victim and oppressor are roles within the same drama of unconsciousness. When you wake, the play dissolves, and all that remains is consciousness observing itself through countless mirrors. This is why awakening feels lonely, because you are no longer playing the game of projection. You see others clearly, but they may not yet see you. The masks of personality still surround you, and sometimes you will ache for the comfort of shared illusion, but that ache is sacred. It is the soul mourning its own innocence before transformation, and as with all grief, it will pass, leaving behind a more spacious love, one that does not cling. It is in this spaciousness that divine respect is born. Respect, in its truest sense, means to look again. To respect yourself is to see yourself with divine eyes, to look again beyond the distortions of fear and conditioning. The same applies to others. Even when they wound you, you can look again and see their suffering behind their behavior. You no longer tolerate disrespect, but you no longer need to hate it either. You simply recognize it as unconsciousness in motion, and you walk away with calm authority. This calm is not passivity, it is mastery. It is the mark of one who has learned that power is not the ability to control others, but the ability to remain aligned with truth in their presence. The old ego, addicted to validation, needed others to confirm its boundaries. The awakened self needs only silence. Silence becomes the new weapon, the new language, the new protection. You begin to understand that silence is not emptiness. It is containment. It is the womb of power. When you stop explaining your worth, you begin radiating it, and those attuned to truth will recognize it without words. They will not need your defense. They will feel your presence as clarity itself. There is a deeper layer to this process, a metaphysical one that few perceive. The soul's refusal to tolerate disrespect is not merely psychological, it is evolutionary. Every human boundary mirrors a cosmic law, just as the universe expands by setting limits between order and chaos. So does the individual psyche grow by defining where the sacred begins and ends. Boundaries are the architecture of divinity expressed in human form. When you establish a boundary, you are not building a wall, you are drawing a sacred circle, a mandala of selfhood. Within that circle resides the temple of your being. Jung often saw mandalas appear in his patients' dreams during times of profound transformation. They symbolized the reordering of psychic chaos, the return of the fragmented soul to its center. Each time you say, "I will not accept this energy," you are sketching the perimeter of your own mandala, the boundary of wholeness, and soon you realize that respect itself is a frequency not demanded, but emanated. You cannot teach people how to treat you. You can only show them through the vibration you emit. Those who resonate with it will stay. Those who do not will drift away, like leaves carried by a different wind. Do not chase them. Their departure is sacred economy. The universe is removing what cannot honor your temple. In this new life, peace takes on a different texture. It is no longer the fragile peace of avoidance, but the luminous peace of truth. You do not need everyone to approve. For your soul's approval has become enough. You find yourself speaking slower, choosing fewer words, resting more deeply in your own energy. Even silence feels like prayer now. And through this peace, something unexpected arises: compassion for the old self. You look back on the version of you who tolerated so much, and instead of shame, you feel tenderness. That one was not weak, they were loyal to survival. Every compromise was an act of hope, a belief that love could be earned through sacrifice, but love cannot be earned. It can only be allowed, and that realization breaks every remaining chain. The heart expands again, not in naivete, but in wisdom. You can now love without losing yourself. You can now give without draining your essence. You can now forgive without forgetting. This is maturity. The union of love and discernment, of compassion and power. The soul that reaches this balance becomes a beacon for others still trapped in polarity. They will say, "You have changed because your energy no longer feeds their patterns." But in truth, you have simply remembered who you were before the world taught you fear. You have returned to the original design, the imago Dei, within the divine image that knows its worth without comparison. Such remembrance is contagious. The world begins to notice without knowing why. Strangers treat you with more respect. Opportunities arise where doors were once closed. Even adversaries hesitate, sensing an invisible authority around you. That is the power of the integrated psyche. It commands without force. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. Arrogance inflates the ego. Alignment dissolves it. When you are aligned with truth, you no longer need to posture. The mere fact of your being becomes statement enough. You speak less, but your words pierce deeper. You move slower, but with greater gravity. The soul has taken the reins, and the ego has finally bowed, and so what they call change is actually the revelation of constancy. The core of you has not changed. It has merely shed its disguises. The chrysalis did not betray the caterpillar. It fulfilled its promise. The butterfly, radiant and untouchable, carries the memory of every crawling day within its wings. Likewise, your strength carries the memory of every surrender that shaped it. Now you understand that evolution is not a betrayal of the past, but its transmutation. Every too much you endured, every not enough you believed, every silent cry you swallowed, all of it became the fire that tempered your soul. You could not have reached this clarity without first losing yourself in the fog of misunderstanding. The psyche grows through opposites. Only those who have been disrespected truly learn the sacred weight of self-respect. There will come a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you realize that the journey was never about teaching others how to treat you. It was about remembering how to treat yourself as sacred ground. Every act of tolerance toward disrespect was an amnesia of divinity, a momentary forgetting that the soul carries the spark of the infinite. To stop tolerating it is to awaken to your own godhood, not in pride, but in awareness of the living mystery that breathes through you. When I say godhood, I do not speak of dominion over others, but of sovereignty within. To be sovereign is to be whole, to no longer barter fragments of your soul for belonging. Wholeness does not ask permission, it simply is. And so when others say, "You've changed," what they are truly witnessing is the unveiling of this inner sovereignty. It is unsettling to those who still depend on external permission to exist. They mistake your peace for distance, your boundaries for rejection, your silence for judgment, because they have not yet met that silence within themselves. The paradox of awakening is that it returns you to the very simplicity you once left behind. After all the pain, the analysis, the shadow work, the alchemy, the fire, what remains is astonishingly simple. Self-respect as a natural state of being. You no longer need to perform dignity. You are dignity. You no longer need to defend your worth. You embody it. It is a quiet realization, one that requires no audience. You will move through the world differently now. Where you once sought signs, you now emanate them. Where you once prayed for direction, you now walk as the answer. The psyche, long fragmented into archetypal conflict, begins to harmonize the lover. No longer sacrifices for the hero. The child no longer fears the parent. The shadow no longer wars against the light. All are seated at the same table within you, and peace becomes your natural fragrance. It is at this stage that many mistake stillness for stagnation. They ask, "Why are you so calm? Why don't you react?" But calm is not emptiness. It is presence freed from compulsion. You no longer dance to every emotional demand thrown your way. You watch energy move, discern its origin, and choose whether to engage. That choice, conscious, deliberate, sovereign, is the highest act of love you can offer the world. For love without discernment becomes enabling, and compassion without wisdom becomes self-destruction. Sometimes you will revisit your old world, not out of nostalgia, but to witness how far you have traveled. You will meet faces that once held power over you and feel nothing but gratitude. You will stand in places where you once trembled and find serenity. That is the final proof of transformation, when the past no longer pulls, but blesses. The shadow that once haunted you now stands beside you as ally. The wounds have become eyes. Understand this. Deeply, individuation does not end with separation. It culminates in integration. The self, once fragmented by dualities, learns to embrace paradox. You realize that the parts of you that tolerated disrespect were not enemies but teachers. They showed you where love was still conditional, where fear still governed choice. Without them, there would be no awakening. Therefore, you do not reject your old self. You honor it, you thank it for its service, and let it rest. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. Your compassion expands beyond the personal. You begin to see the whole of humanity as a single psyche struggling towards self-respect. Every act of cruelty, every instance of manipulation, every attempt to control, all of it arises from the same unconscious wound, the terror of worthlessness. You see that those who disrespect others are merely projecting their own unhealed self-disrespect. Their behavior, though painful, is a confession of inner exile. This realization does not excuse, but it enlightens. You begin to meet the world, not with judgment, but with awareness. You set boundaries without hatred. You walk away without resentment. You speak truth without trembling. This is mastery, the union of strength and grace. And still, there will be moments when the human heart aches for understanding. You may lie awake some nights, wondering if perhaps you were too harsh, too distant, too proud. The psyche will always test the solidity of new integration. In those moments, remember that doubt is not regression, it is refinement. Even gold, once purified, must be hammered into shape. The soul's hammer is self-inquiry. Each strike deepens your authenticity. When confusion comes, return to the body. The body is the temple of the unconscious. It never lies where disrespect once caused contraction. Respect feels like expansion. Your heart will tell you what is true by the way it breathes. The intellect argues endlessly, but the heart knows. If you listen closely, you will hear an ancient rhythm inside the same rhythm that moves the stars, that pulls the tides, that hums through the atoms. It is the rhythm of divine order, and your boundaries are one of its instruments. To live in respect is to live in harmony with that order. You no longer fight life, you flow with it. The same energy that once attracted pain now attracts peace. For you have changed the tone of your being. You will notice subtle miracles. Where once you were invisible, you are now seen, not because others' eyes changed, but because you began to shine. Where once your words were dismissed, now they land with weight, not because your voice grew louder, but because it carries alignment where once you begged for recognition, now opportunities arrive unbidden. The external world finally mirrors the respect you have cultivated within. The truth is that people never truly disrespect you. They simply reflect the level of respect you have yet to claim. The moment you embody worth, they respond instinctively, either rising to meet you or falling away. This is spiritual law, immutable and precise. And so, if they say you've changed, smile. They are witnessing the law in motion. They are encountering their own limitation in the mirror of your freedom. Some will hate it, others will be inspired. Both responses are sacred. You need not correct either, because the soul that has awakened to self-respect no longer seeks control, it seeks coherence. It is not concerned with winning arguments, only with maintaining inner symmetry. You will choose peace over persuasion, truth over triumph. The old battles will lose their flavor. You will watch others fight for illusions and feel only compassion for their fatigue. You have been there. You know the cost. This is what true change looks like. Not noise, not drama, not revenge, but serenity so deep it unsettles the unhealed. They will call it arrogance because they cannot yet distinguish confidence from self-possession, but you will know that what they see as distance is actually depth, and in time, some of them will return changed, softened, curious. They will ask, how did you do it? How did you stop being affected? And you will smile. Perhaps gently take their hand and say, I didn't stop feeling, I started listening. Because self-respect is not a shield against emotion, it is the capacity to feel everything without losing center. By then, you will no longer need to explain. Your life itself will speak. The way you enter a room, the way you pause before responding, the way you no longer chase closure, these will be your gospel. You will have become a walking sermon of boundaries sanctified by grace. This is the secret Jung hinted at in all his work, that individuation is not becoming someone new, but remembering what the self has always been divine, dignified, eternal. The path is not ascent, but return. The soul was never unworthy. It was only unconscious. Awakening to this truth is the final liberation. So, when they say, you've changed, tell them the truth if you wish. Yes, I have changed. I have stopped betraying myself to keep the peace. I have stopped confusing loyalty with servitude. I have stopped calling fear love. I have remembered who I am. And if they cannot understand, let that be your last lesson in letting go. For understanding is not required where peace is already found. One day, perhaps far from now, those same voices that once questioned you will whisper the same words to someone else. You've changed. And maybe they will smile too, because they will know the ripple will continue, passing from soul to soul, awakening after awakening, until humanity itself learns the sacred art of self-respect. And when that day comes, The phrase "you've changed" will no longer be an accusation, but a blessing. It will mean you have remembered your light, and for that is what this journey has always been: the remembering, the return, the revelation of the eternal self, shining quietly behind every boundary you ever built. And through that revelation, you become not only whole, but holy